The horror coming out of Ukraine tonight as Russian troops withdraw from areas around the capital of Kyiv, what's now been left behind. The brutality now on full display for the entire world. In the town of Bucha, Ukrainian authorities say they have found hundreds of men, women, and children killed. Some with their hands tied behind their backs, a man with what appeared to be a bag of groceries. Some appearing to have been tortured, broken limbs. President Biden again calling Vladimir Putin a war criminal, saying Putin should be tried for war crimes. Tonight, Russia saying this has been staged, calling the images another hoax from Ukraine and the West. We warn you tonight, the images here are disturbing. Bucha, along with so many Ukrainian cities now, a scene of terrible destruction, military equipment burned in the streets, homes destroyed. But what Ukrainian authorities found after the Russians left is far worse. There is carnage, bodies in the streets, near a church, a mass grave, dozens buried in a trench after the morgue was full. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky visiting Bucha, overwhelmed by what he saw, clearly emotional today, calling it genocide. Our James Longman traveling to Bucha, what our team witnessed firsthand on the streets and in a basement underground. You will see that here in a moment. And though Russian troops have left that town now, what the U.S. now believes is coming next. Martha Raddatz standing by on that tonight, but we're going to begin with ABC's James Longman leading us off with what he witnessed, the images, and again, that warning. They are disturbing.
Tonight, life and death under Russian occupation. The first glimpse of what the Ukrainian government is calling scenes of war crimes. The suburbs of Kyiv, controlled by Russia for weeks, have just been liberated by Ukrainian forces. We headed out to see the first evidence of Russia's horrific atrocities.
Take a look, this is Bucha. And this entire column of Russian vehicles and tanks was completely destroyed by the Ukrainians. But take a look at where we are here, because it looks like Russian military vehicles were parked all along this road. But we're so close to residential buildings.
Authorities here telling us more than 400 people were killed. Streets littered with bodies. Civilians look to have been executed in the streets. This man, hands bound behind his back. Another appears to have been shot while riding his bicycle. This, a small bag of groceries beside another victim. What threat did he pose? As terrible as these images are, what we were shown next, even worse. In the basement of this building, in which Russian forces looked to have squatted for weeks.
So as I stand here talking to you, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bodies in this tiny room in this basement where Ukrainians say people have been tortured, and I can see their hands behind their backs. It is a truly apocalyptic scene. It's just absolutely horrific in here. And this is what Ukraine says is happening across this country.
Russia has tonight denied responsibility for this, calling these images staged, but we saw the reality up close. And tonight, the New York Times analysing this new satellite image dated March 19th, when the Russians were occupying Bucha, saying it shows bodies in the street. Ukraine has opened up criminal investigations here. Tatiana Volodymyrivna says Russian soldiers broke into her home and dragged her and her husband out. Her husband disappeared for 2 weeks. She said she found his body in a basement. He'd been shot in the head, mutilated, tortured, she says. He was buried a metre deep, so the dogs wouldn't eat him. Satellite images showing a 40-foot trench that Ukrainians say is a massive grave, an unknown number of people buried outside of a church.
We've been brought to a wooded area just outside of Bucha. This is in the Kyiv region, the collection of towns and villages that the Russians have moved out of. And authorities have brought us to what looks like the grave, the hastily dug grave of what they say is the family of the local mayor here. They didn't agree to cooperate with the Russians, they say, so they were executed.
The mayor was Olga Sukenko, and Ukrainians say she was tortured, her arms and fingers broken, her husband and young son allegedly kidnapped by Russian soldiers more than 2 weeks ago. Their bodies still lying in this pit because officials suspect mines are buried nearby. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Bucha today. He's been the face of his country's resistance, now the voice of their outrage. These are war crimes and they'll be recognized by the world as genocide, he said. You are here today and can see what happened. A shaken Zelensky accusing Russian forces of killing thousands of Ukrainians, torturing victims, raping women and murdering children. Today, after learning about the horrors of Bucha, President Biden vowed more sanctions for Russia, saying Putin should be tried for war crimes.
He is a war criminal. This guy is brutal. And what's happening in Bucha is outrageous, and everyone's seen it.
And while their withdrawal reveals the horrors near Kyiv, Russian attacks elsewhere compound the misery. Bodies lay in front of a playground in Kharkiv as the city's exhausted residents clean up after what seems to be never-ending shelling. And in Mariupol, a wasteland. More than 100,000 people are still living in this, almost entirely cut off from the outside world. Residents dig graves for their neighbors in the streets. Even getting water means risking their lives. And back in Bucha tonight, the one site residents welcome. Ukrainian forces back in control of their streets. This officer saying, if something is needed, come to us. And that woman answering, thank you, thank you.
Just extraordinary what you and the team witnessed today. James Longman, now back in the capital of Kyiv for us tonight. James, you heard the White House saying new sanctions on Russia are coming this week. Russia tonight saying those horrific scenes you just reported on out of Bucha were staged. That was the word they used. But of course, you witnessed this brutal reality today firsthand.
Well, there was nothing staged about what we saw today, David. And what struck me was the futility of it. There didn't seem to be any strategy there, no reason for these deaths, just apparently murder or retribution. And that's the story of this war, a huge pointless miscalculation, and the results are only heartache. And the great fear, David, is that as more territory is regained, more of these atrocities are going to be uncovered.
Which is why it's so important that we continue to report on it, and we really appreciate your bravery and the team's bravery on the ground there, James. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.